disgrace. When I think about they're going to force us to use toxic light bulbs,
Right.
that they pour terribly toxic vile materials into the Gulf. The EPA let that happen. And then they turn around and they call carbon a toxin. This is a fraudulent organization. I can't even believe we allow them to exist.
You know, as much as I'm all for alternative energy, and I think there's some promise in solar and locally in wind power is a major issue, and it helped create the problems that they have in Europe because they all bought into the green agenda and pushed for solar and wind power.
I can see the attraction, can't you?
Sure.
At the conceptual level.
Spain looked at it after a number of years of implementing this high degree of subsidization of solar and wind, and they found that Dr. Calzada, Juan Marcos University, did a study, found that for every green job that was created in the process of this renewable energy push, they lost 2.2 real jobs because the cost of energy skyrocketed and the big corporations said, we can't afford to do business here anymore. So they built plants in India or China or someplace else in the world, and workers were left out on the street. And for every 10 green jobs that were created building windmills, only one was permanent. Because once you build the windmills, you don't need the contractors to stand around anymore. They have to wait for the next opportunity. And they found that the unemployment rose to 18.7 or 9% in Spain, and now they're backing off of that. A similar experience in Denmark, a similar experience in Germany, Italy. I spoke to at a conference a scientist who did a similar study and found the same results in Italy. But worse than all of that is the environmental movement has been totally silent, especially the World Wildlife Fund and the groups that deal with animals, on what windmills do to bird life and bats. Greenpeace had sued ExxonMobil for 6 birds that were found in an oil tank that had drowned and got $600,000 in fines imposed. Well, it's been estimated anywhere from 200,000 to 1 million birds a year will be killed by windmills in this country, including, and they're finding it in the UK as well, including the high-value birds, the golden eagles, the bats, which are very valuable and eating insects, are being killed by the hundreds of thousands as well.
There's another side to the wind, though, Joe, that I think you know, but you may not be talking about, which is I was always very excited about wind power. I had just believed everything I had heard about it. And then I did an interview some months ago about wind power and found out that a lot of the big energy and lighting companies are involved in this, and it actually ends up costing more money and taxes the grid more to use wind. And so there's a whole economical side of it that's never really been analyzed on a detailed level.
You're exactly right. They found the same thing in Denmark and Spain, Italy, that they could not close a single fossil fuel plant where they put up windmills because the wind was too erratic and unpredictable. And you can't have your lights dim or go out. You have to maintain a constant energy. So they had to keep fossil fuel plants in a ready backup mode or in production and integrate wind into the grid. The CO2 emissions from these coal and oil power plants in their less efficient modes actually resulted in an increase in the CO2 by 36% in one country and 50%, I believe, in Denmark. So it didn't solve the problem of CO2. It killed birds and bats, but it underdelivered on the amount of energy it provided and cost jobs and didn't save any fossil fuel. So as much as I was an early endorser of wind and solar as a supplement, always thought of it as a supplement, not as a primary source, but I have cooled a lot on wind power as a reliable source. Perhaps in the middle of the desert, along with solar panels, it makes sense, but not anywhere near people. There are also health hazards. They've found wind turbines make a humming noise that causes people to have headaches, migraines, not be able to sleep.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
I didn't know that at all.
So that's another downside to the wind. But
I'm for Tesla, the work that Tesla did. I'm for advanced energy systems and methods. And I'm a big believer that energy really was created to be free and that this shouldn't even be used in a form of accounting. It's absurd. We live at a time where we should be living as human beings in a very advanced, highly matured, evolved way. And there's no reason to have a cost associated with energy. It's unnecessary. And with the physics that's now known, the biophotonic work, the things that we now know in electromagnetics are so advanced, and even the information that's kept from us that's very advanced by DARPA and others, we really have everything already. Energy should be a non-cost item. And I don't just believe in setting up more of the same, of something that continues to grow and escalate in its cost. It's unnecessary. I'm very much interested in establishing a parallel economy that doesn't function from the same paradigm of thinking that we're entrenched in. Because what you and I are really talking about is separating the wheat from the chaff, apples from oranges, making distinctions, making things clear so that people can see the real light of the situation.
Right.
And not be smothered by and ingesting a falsity about what's happening. But the reality is that energy doesn't have to have a cost. That's the first part of a new paradigm. Why does it have to have a cost? And if it does, it should be so inexpensive if it's advanced. It doesn't have to be expensive. And there you have, when you have an economy of scale and you have a paradigm that uses the Tesla technology. I mean, there's a reason why Raytheon filed for the patents of Tesla when he died. Took his weather engineering, took a lot of his patents, and the military industrial complex owns it. There's a reason. There's a reason for that. And so we all talk about renewables, but can you imagine that the sun is left out of the equation of weather and climate? And you and Anthony Watts wrote up about these surface stations. They don't even tell the public the true state of these stations, and that all this has to be dug up and put together and found out and explained to the public. And yet many people are going to be completely hypnotized by what a presidential leader will say or what a regulatory agency will say. And here we are at a time where what we're talking about is a potential for mass enslavement. And we live at a time where we can do better. We can do a lot better.
A lot better. I agree with you.
What is your wish for the next few years? What is it that you would like to see happen?
I would like, as one of the professors at the University of East Anglia said, that ClimateGate turns out to be a turning point, a game changer, and researchers become more upfront, open, and explicit, and we start looking at the reality in terms of the real drivers for climate, that we also stop this nonsense of thinking we have all the answers on energy, and the answers are batteries that go into cars, as if the electricity that feeds the batteries isn't produced by a fossil fuel plant, a nonsense there. That we incent corporations like Raytheon to move the ball forward in developing the true alternative energy sources, improving the solar. Some improvements have been made in recent years that make it much more efficient. But not ignore what we know about using the wealth of resources this country has in terms of coal, natural gas, tar sands, and oil offshore, and convert that to clean coal.
Does clean coal really exist? Because I heard it doesn't really exist, and it's
Well,
just a package name. What is it?
There's a plant, I believe, in Montana. The technology exists to gasify or liquefy it and produce clean fuel, natural gas, basically, from coal. They use this in Germany as well, and we can do that. It has been not cost-effective, but if energy costs rise, it will become much more cost-effective. And also, it has not been frowned on. The powers that be seem to be enamored by ethanol from corn and also sun and wind.
Using food, I think ethanol is one of the biggest wastes of money. It's going to ruin farms. It's going to ruin rural areas.
Right. I was in Brazil where they use sugarcane and much more efficiently in ethanol, and I drove in a car that was powered by natural gas, much higher miles per gallon, averages the equivalent of 50 miles per gallon in the cab that I drove. They're further along in the proper use of alternative energy than we are in this country, surprisingly.
So people should go to your site, icecap.us, and what is that site about?
Well, we look at all sides of the climate issue and the politics that's involved, but also new papers that come out talk about the sun, the ocean,